And welcome once again to Happening in Medfield. As you no doubt are aware of the fact that I sit with the town administrator, Mike Sullivan, and we discuss the happenings in Medfield. There's quite a few coming up, as you no doubt know. And so without further ado, I once again turn this over to Mike to get the necessary information that I'm quite sure a lot of our viewers are interested in viewing and hearing. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Jack, and happy spring. I hope it comes in a lot faster and that the winter goes out fast. It's been one awful winter, and I don't think anybody's going to be glad to see it go, except maybe some of the diehard skiers.
Probably so. A lot of people have been commenting about this has been a long, hard, cold winter.
Yes, yeah. The good part was that the cold kept several of the snowstorms south of us, so Philadelphia and Washington seem to get more than Boston this year, which is unusual. So if you could put up with the cold, then it helped with the snow accumulation, minimize the snow accumulation anyway. But I'll still take spring.
Oh, I will too, most definitely. But as you may know, I come from an area that has no
winter, yes.
climate. It's all just one.
Oh, so boring. But they've got earthquakes and mudslides.
That's
and
about right.
Santa Ana winds and everything else to make up for it. So.
And I can say this very honestly. I'm glad I'm in New England.
Yes, yeah. When I was reading an article recently about the rising tides from global warming and how they've got to, build the coastline of California up, but then they said there's going to be a major earthquake coming soon because they haven't had one in, 80 years or something. And then, of course, they have the drought out there that they've had. So you can't escape. No matter where you go, there's always something that, in terms of Mother Nature, is going to show you who's boss. So.
You never know when it hits.
Yeah.
Changing it to a very important town meeting we had. You want to give me a rundown on number one, because then we turn right around and we have number two.
Sure. It's been a while since we've had two specials in a year. We had a special in October to deal with the water issues and design of the water tower, and now we have the special this month to deal with the state hospital land acquisition, and it was quite a turnout. It was almost 900 registered voters.
So what was the count again?
It was almost 900.
Beautiful.
There were a couple of different counts depending on who you talked to, and of course there were a lot of people there that were not registered voters, a lot of visitors, and so it was probably over 900 if you took total and add in the jazz band, who, by the way, do a terrific job, and are on their way to the Lincoln Center again for the Ellington performance, which is quite a feat for them. I hope they do well, and I know they'll do well. It's just a question of whether they win, but they'll do well regardless.
Mike, I had noted there was only two gentlemen that spoke relative to objecting.
Yeah, and they weren't so much objecting as cautioning that if the town did acquire the land, that the town had to come back and rezone the land and develop it in order to pay for some of the acquisition and cleanup costs. And they're right. It's rare that you vote in the opposite way from someone, but you agree with everything they say, and I agreed with what they said in terms of the necessity for rezoning the land and doing some development up there to cover the cost. Because for those of you who weren't there, the town voted overwhelmingly to purchase the state hospital land, two parcels up there, one about 95 acres and the other about 39 acres for unencumbered use, whatever the town wishes to do with it if the legislation goes through. There were actually three articles. The The first article is whether the town wanted to purchase it from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The offering price from the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance is $3.1 million, payable over 10 years with no interest charges if it goes through the way they're proposing it. Then there was an article to appropriate $150,000 for maintenance of the land, policing, security, and repairs to any vandalism or potholes or whatever. And the third article was to authorize the selectmen to submit legislation to the state regarding the purchase. And that town meeting, it seemed at the end of town meeting that everything was resolved, but it's just the beginning of the process, because now there was a flurry of emails going back and forth between Steve Nolan, who was the chairman of the study committee, and the counsel for DCAM, the counsel for the Department of Revenue, state representative Garlick's office, Senator Timothy's office, the selectmen. So trying to hammer out the final language of the legislation, and I think they've got it finally worked out. It should be submitted probably either today or tomorrow. There were a lot of legal wording issues. So that legislation now has to go through the House and the Senate, and then if it gets passed in both branches, it gets sent to the governor's office for signature, and that would authorize the transfer of the property. The Senate and the House adjourn around July 31st, and the legislative session is a 2-year session. They're elected for 2-year terms, so their session is 2 years. July 31st of this year will be the end of their formal sessions, and then they adjourn. They still are can be an informal session, but they adjourn to start campaigning for the next term. The elections are in November, and this time, in addition to the Senate and House, the governor is up for re-election, and of course he's announced that he's not running. So we're trying to get that legislation through the House and the Senate before they adjourn July 31st, and then send it up to the governor. And we feel that since the conditions were negotiated by his staff, that he will sign the legislation. But it's still a ways to go. We're not there yet.
One thing, Mike, I utilize the terminology, we passed one. Number two is the 31st, the voting and so forth at the center.
Yes,
which is
right.
A combined factor of not many running, but I'll go into that later. But how does it look to you now? Because we had over 900 or better people there. Let's hope we have a good turnout.
Yes. Based on the town meeting vote, it should pass easily, and it only needs a majority vote, whereas at town meeting it needed a 2/3 vote. But you never know. It depends on who shows up at the polls, and you can always be surprised. I remember a number of years ago there was a school bond issue that passed town meeting by a 2/3 vote and then failed at the override vote at the polls. So it is important for people to go and vote on the 31st of March. And as you probably know by now, the election is held at the center at Medfield down on Ice House Road. So it's been combined with the annual town election of officers.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, there's not much excitement there. There are no contested races. In fact, I believe there's one seat on Park and Rec where no one took out papers for, so that will be settled probably by a write-in vote. But that question, the debt exclusion override question, to exempt the $3.1 million that would be the purchase price for the property will be on the ballot. So it's important that people vote on the 31st just on that question alone.
Readily understandable because of the fact that we've said this a number of times, even before the town meeting, to get out and vote. Well, this is crucial. Once this is voted upon and agreed upon, then it gives sufficient amount of time to file with the state relative to the purchase and so forth.
Right. Yeah. Now, it may be a little bit confusing to people because we had a town meeting in October, and we filed legislation based on the results of that town meeting to ask the state to give us 6 acres of land plus easements to rebuild the water tower at the state hospital.
I was going to ask you about that.
So that will be in October. The town meeting appropriated funds to design the water tower and water mains. That's being done right now, and we're hoping to have a pretty good handle on the cost by town meeting. There is an article on the town meeting warrant to appropriate funds to build the water tower and to build connecting mains, the main one being from the water tower through the state hospital property up up Hospital Road, and then up North Meadows Road to tie it into well number 6, so that should save us quite a bit on our energy costs, because right now we have to pump the water all the way to Mount Nebo water tower. Right. And this will give a much more direct route to the new water tower once it's built. So we think that by the end of next week, we should have the legislation passed to get the 6 acres that we need to build the water tower plus the easements. It is the bill to do that has been engrossed in the Senate and in the House, and now when they come back into formal session next week, we expect that they will vote to pass that. Engrossment is some technical term for the process that goes on in there, but it's been through all the subcommittees and committees, and it's been engrossed in 3rd reading. I guess they have to read a bill 3 times before it's engrossed, and then it's voted on by the Senate and the House in full session. So if it's approved by both branches, then it goes to the governor for signature. So we're hoping to have all that accomplished by the town meeting, so that when the voters are asked to vote for the right now we're estimating $4.5 million to build the water tower and the water mains, that we will be assured that we have the land to put it on. And our legislators have been particularly helpful in stirring that bill through. Representative Garlick and Senator Timilty in particular have been very diligent in pursuing that legislation to make sure it passes.
Well, now the water tower, that comes up at the town meeting.
Right. And a couple of people have asked, well, is there going to be an override vote on the water tower? And the answer to that is no. The water tower is going to be, that money will be borrowed, and the debt service payments on that will be paid for out of the water receipts. So there's no override required on that. The Water Enterprise Fund is self-sufficient, and the water rates will cover the debt service payments on that.
So this comes up for vote at the town meeting in April, right?
At the town meeting in April. It's going to be a long town meeting, I think. There are 45 articles on the warrant, which is
I was going to ask you about
much more. I think last year we had about 30. Now, about 10 of those are these revolving accounts that we have for the ambulance and the library and the community gardens and the respite care fund. So those are pretty routine. We try to put those on a consent calendar to speed up the process. But there are several other big issues. In addition to the appropriating funds and authorizing bonding for the water tower, there's a request for somewhere between 800 and 850,000 to complete the design of the public safety building. As you know, the town appropriated 500,000 last year to begin the design plan, and that's been underway. The Permanent Building Committee has been meeting on a regular basis. They've hired architects and project managers, and they have the building pretty well laid out in terms of space and size and whatnot. But they have to get the working drawings and the bid documents together. And what they'd like to do is get all that done and then have a special town meeting maybe around next January or February to bond that. That will require an override vote.
That will require an override.
Yes, not for the 800 to 850 we're appropriating at this town meeting, but the money to build the station itself will require a debt exclusion.
Well, does this encompass both police and fire department?
Police, fire, and of course the fire also does the ambulance, so it will cover all three. And civil defense, or what they now call MEMA. So it'll be, it's a large structure, quite attractive. I think people will be quite pleased with the appearance. It's costly as all these projects are. You know, I keep saying, oh, how can these buildings be so expensive? But when you see all the work that goes into them, and it's like the town garage construction.
I was going to ask, how's that coming along?
It's really coming along pretty well now. After a very rough winter in terms of construction, they had a brutal time trying to keep the building warm enough to work on. And but they have the exterior. I mean, it's taken shape. They're working on the exterior block now. That's pretty well underway. They this week they poured the floor for the office wing, the concrete floor. So it's really, and they're framing the office wing this week also. So they're hoping next week to pour the floor for one of the garage wings. There's 2 garage wings and an office wing in it. So that's coming along quite well. We're hoping to be somewhat under budget on that, so that would be nice to go back to the voters, particularly when we're looking at money for a public safety building, and say, we didn't spend all the money you gave us. So,
excellent. The town meeting, which is in April, what others are on the warrant committee that are?
Well, there's a lot on there. There's the, in addition to the water tower and the public safety building, those are the big dollar amounts. There are 3 or 4 articles in connection with codification of the bylaws and the charter and the regulations, which basically means you put in some sort of order so that when somebody comes in and say wants a building permit to put in a swimming pool, they can go through the bylaws and regulations and find out exactly what has to be done. Right now it can be somewhat of an arduous process because the bylaws have been and regulations have been adopted over a number of years and just added onto and in some cases don't make any sense. But if you group everything together, presumably it will make it much easier for people that want to do something to find their way through the sometimes morass of rules and regulations that the town imposes on things. So that's, we've had a charter and bylaw study committee that's been working quite diligently on that. They've done a nice job putting that all together. The articles themselves are kind of confusing because they're eliminating parts of the bylaw, or they're adding things in. There's cross out, there's underlines. It goes on for several pages. So hopefully they will explain it fairly well at town meetings so you don't actually have to read all of that stuff. But for anyone that does want to read it all, there will be copies available online in the town clerk's office and in the library. So the person that's curious and wants to make sure they understand it can read it all before town meeting. There's also a couple of articles that the Energy Committee has put on. They would like to see Medfield certified by the Commonwealth as a green community, and there are 5 conditions to do that. 2 of the conditions require a town meeting vote, so they have articles on to vote on those 2 issues. One of them is to accept the stretch code as a supplement to the building code. And now that was somewhat controversial when it came up before. It was actually withdrawn. It didn't get approved by town meeting. But they will have that on again. And then they also have an article on to authorize zoning by right for solar photovoltaic generating facilities. Basically, these solar panel farms that you see cropping up around the area. When they say zoning by right, it means that you wouldn't have to go for variance to put it in. It's allowed by right. And the way it's proposed will be allowed by right in the business, industrial, and the industrial area, which is down along, primarily on West Street and North Meadows Road, that area. It would be allowed by special permit in residential areas, because many of the areas where they are talking about putting these things, or at least looking at them, are in residential areas. For example, the old landfill is one site they want to look at. The sewer treatment plant is another site they're hoping might be suitable. So, as I said, those articles that would make us eligible for green community certification, there'll be 2 of those on. We have the usual operating budget articles, the capital budget articles. We are having a big increase in our health insurance rates this year. The last 2 years we were lucky. Last year the health insurance rates didn't go up at all. In this current year we're in right now, they went up 1.72%. Next year we're going to have a rate increase of about 8.8%. So that's over $300,000 for that. So there are some big issues to be dealt with, some big dollar amounts of money to be spent. So I think it's hopefully we'll get a good turnout. I don't think we'll have the 900 people we had for the state hospital this year, but hopefully we'll have a good turnout.
We actually, as I sit and listen, we need a good turnout. People have got to get with it. I mean, as I've said this so many times, Mike, that Medfield, it's their town, and what happens within their town, they should show a lot of factors. And the only way they can find those things out is by going to the town meeting.
Exactly. Oh, one other issue too that's on the warrant is the disposition of Lot 3 at Ice House Road. There's 2 articles dealing with that. One submitted by the Park and Recreation Commission, and the other by citizen petition. And one would have the land turned over to the Park and Recreation Commission. The other would have it put out to bid, authorize the selectmen to put it out to bid. And the Economic Development Committee that was appointed by the selectmen last year is taking a look to see what type of uses might be appropriate. I know there was a suggestion for some sort of an indoor sports facility, indoor soccer, hockey, basketball, whatever, lacrosse. And there may be other uses. There was some talk about whether it would be suitable for 55 and older housing, but we'll see. But those 2 articles are also on the warrant, so it's as I said, quite a lengthy warrant this year.
Boy, that's obvious. Brings up a question about housing. How's that look?
Housing, well, I think the big push on housing will be what's done at the state hospital, whether there is, one of the things the study committee on the state hospital had a visioning session down at the center a couple of months ago. It was an all-day Saturday session and had a pretty decent turnout. And there seemed to be a consensus that the state hospital property, in addition to maintaining as much open space as possible, should be looked at to address some of the needs for 55 and older housing. We've had an awful lot of people who, when their children grow up, move out of the house.
And they go on in Norfolk or
They go to Norfolk, Franklin, even New Hampshire and the Cape. And many of them say they'd like to stay in Medfield, but we don't have the type of housing they're looking for. Many of them are looking for a first floor bedroom or master suite. Many of them are looking for small yards and the ability to, if they want to go to Florida for a couple of months in the winter, they don't have to worry about pipes freezing and have people that can keep an eye on the house, plus do it at a reasonable cost. As you know, we've had some very nice housing put up down on Spring Street. Maple Street is the actual street in there, but there's about 43 units that are being built by Ralph Costello. And but those are very expensive. I mean, they're beyond the means of most of our seniors in town.
See, that's the problem, because you're dealing with a senior and they're in a fixed income bracket, and consequently, when you throw, that house there, that's only about
Yes.
500,000. Now wait a minute,
Yes.
So
It
makes it difficult.
It certainly does. So that's one of the issues. The other thing is the need to address our 40B requirements so that we aren't subject to what happened down on West Street, where we had a developer come in and is about to begin construction on a 92-unit apartment complex on industrial land down off West Street. If we could do some of the housing up there to meet the requirements of 40B and get credit and get up to our 10% on that would be a big help. So it's housing is a difficult issue. For that, the housing market was dormant for a long time because of the recession. Houses weren't moving, but now it seems they're starting to move again. And the question of affordability is beginning to rear its ugly head because many of the properties, as they come back on the market, the prices are going up, and it's difficult for people to afford them. Not only the seniors, but also young families starting out.
Very true. Very, very true. And consequently, they're asking for so much down and so much, it gets pretty high.
Yeah. And now there seems to be some speculation that interest rates may start rising again within a year or two, and that becomes another issue for people trying to swing a mortgage payment and to tax payments. So.
It hurts. Well, I look at the time. Let's recap at the top relative to the state hospital.
Sure. The town meeting last week did approve the purchase, the filing of legislation, and approved the bonding to purchase about 134 acres of property up at the state hospital. So that will be moving along now. There's legislation that's be filed at the State House, and it has to be passed by the Senate and the House and signed by the governor, and in order for the acquisition to proceed. We're hoping to have that done by the end of the year. Whether that's possible or not, we don't know, but it would be nice to have it done during the current administration with the current DCAM commissioner, Commissioner Cornelison, who has been very helpful in the whole negotiating process. be nice to get it done during their tenure, because you don't know who will be the next governor, who will be the next DCAM commissioner,
Very true.
whether they will have the same attitude towards the town acquiring the property. We also are at the annual town meeting going to be looking for funds to build the water tower and water mains to replace the water tower at the state hospital. And we're hoping to have the legislation to have that land given to the town to put it on approved this month. We also will be looking for funds to complete the design of the public safety building, so we can get that out to bid and come back next winter with a bid price, so that we can ask the town meeting to appropriate the funds for that. That's if it passes at this spring town meeting. And there's items on there regarding the Green Communities Bill. There's items on there about the disposition of Lot 3 at Ice House Road. Mm-hmm. So, and then the charter and bylaw regulation codification. So, a lot of stuff to chew on at the town meeting this year.
Awful lot of it. We were talking earlier relative to voting, especially at the end of this month, because you've passed phase 1, now it's phase 2, and it's up to the voter.
Right.
And then from there it'll go on.
You're right. The override question for the purchase of state hospital land, right, as you mentioned earlier, will be on the ballot at the end of the month. I believe it's the 31st of March.
Right.
So please consider going to vote on that as a follow-up to the town meeting vote. It needs both. Both need to pass.
Very, very important. And now the town meeting is in April. What's the date in April?
Town meeting is April 28th. It's always the last Monday in April. So
28th. So you want to take those things into consideration, because believe it or not, as we've mentioned, and you especially, there's quite a plateful.
It is, and time marches on. We're already in spring, even if only by about a half an hour.
Yeah, so we're into spring. Well, I see the old clock on the wall as usual to draw our chat to a close. What'd you like to add before we say goodnight?
Well, I'd like to thank all the people that did come out to the town meeting. It was really quite a demonstration of their concern for the town, and it was, as I say, quite a turnout. I think the Commissioner Cornelison was surprised. She had never been to a town meeting before. Was very impressed at the high level of the discussion. I think the SHRC and the SHAC committee both did a great job in putting together and examining the whole issue and putting together their recommendations for the town. And I think the town has been well served by both committees. And I think the respect for that was shown at the town meeting by the almost unanimous vote for to implement their recommendations. So kudos to them. Many thanks.
Well, Mike, once again, as we sit here and chat on a monthly basis, the happenings in Medfield, I do want to thank you for sitting and talk about it. One thing I did want to add, I had an opportunity after that meeting to say hello to Scott McDermott. That was a very fast meeting. It only lasted an hour and a half.
It was, yes. He really, we were all surprised that. We expected to be there until 11 o'clock at night.
I mean, yes. Here at Medfield TV, we expected yes. going to be there quite a while.
Yes. And it was well organized. I mean, your former board member, Chris Allen, did a great job on the audio.
Always.
Aditi and all the Medfield TV people did a great job on the audio and video transmission, because there was an overflow crowd in the cafeteria, and we had to transmit over there.
Yeah, over in the cafeteria, we
yes.
had the overflow.
The counters and the checkers, and everybody did a great job, and it went very smoothly. So hats off to them also.
But the first thing to remember now is the next one, the 31st. Make it a point. You were there for the first session. Be there now for the second session so we can move accordingly and ahead.
Or as they say on television, to be continued.
To be continued.
Yes.
Mike, I want to thank you very much for our little get-together here at the anchor desk, as we do on a monthly basis, which we will be doing again. And as Mike had said earlier, it's spring, so let's enjoy, perhaps, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, that our weather will change and it becomes warm.
We can only hope.
Very true. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
It's been
Jack.
a pleasure.
As always.
This is Jack Peterson wishing you and yours the very best. Good night.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.